Thank you for joining us again and welcome back to our channel. We appreciate your time. In this episode, there's been a breaking news that China has elevated the relationship between the continent of Africa and China at a more strategic level. What does that mean? It's important to know that both the continent of Africa and China have come to a point where they both have seen that each other has something to bring on the table. And it's important. You scratch my back, I scratch your back. It's no more a normal relationship. It's been elevated to a more strategic level. That means the government of China under Xi Jinping and also the continent of Africa have come to a point where both have realized the importance of each other. That's the reason why the Chinese president clearly elaborated on that particular part of why this relationship has become a more strategic one. I want to apologize about the video we posted yesterday. We had some technical issue in regards to the African expert who talked about his visa experience in the continent of Africa. We will fix that in the future. We appreciate your understanding. Let's play the clip.
In this season of harvest, I am delighted to gather together with so many old and new friends in Beijing to discuss grand plans for China-Africa friendship and cooperation in the new era. Thanks to nearly 70 years of tireless efforts from both sides, the China-Africa relationship is now at its best in history. With its future growth in mind, I propose that bilateral relations between China and all African countries having diplomatic ties with China be elevated to the level of strategic relations. And that the overall characterization of China-Africa relations be elevated to an all-weather China-Africa community with a shared future for the new era.
It's important to note that the president of China, Mr. Xi Jinping, talked about the very importance of the continent of Africa. Why China and Africa have over 1/3 of the world's population. And it's important that with such huge population, that development and modernization is the way forward. There is just no two way about it. If this particular relationship have to survive with regards to geopolitical issues around the world that's impacting the continent of Africa and why Africa continue to make its own choices. Let's play the clip on how the president of China dived into that very important particular modernization issue that the continent of Africa badly needs, and also China on the other hand. Let's roll the clip.
China and Africa account for 1/3 of the world population. Without our modernization, there will be no global modernization. In the next 3 years, China will work with Africa to take the following 10 partnership actions for modernization, to deepen China-Africa cooperation and spearhead the Global South modernization.
But even more important in this particular speech, the Chinese president talked about 10 very important points that are relevant with regards to this relationship, that this would touch from agriculture, health, education, and research-based, and more importantly on innovation, if this relationship have to survive. That's the reason why the continent of Africa is looking for strategic partners that fit its own views, and why this doesn't sit well with regards to Africa's geopolitical partners around the world. This is very important. I think the FOCAC Summit was very important with regards to these 10 points that are relevant to what the continent of Africa needs at this very important time in its history. Let's roll the clip.
First, the partnership action for mutual learning among civilizations. Second, the partnership action for trade prosperity. Third, the partnership action for industrial chain cooperation. Fourth, the partnership action for connectivity. Fifth, the partnership action for development cooperation. Sixth, the partnership action for health. Seventh, the Partnership Action for Agriculture and Livelihoods.
第八，人文交
Eighth,
流
the Partnership Action for People-to-People Exchanges.
第九，绿色发展
Ninth,
伙伴性
the Partnership Action for Green Development.
第十，安全共筑
The Partnership Action for Common Security.
中非共筑现代化之梦
China and Africa's joint pursuit of modernization will set off a wave of modernization in the global south
谱写
and open a new chapter in our drive for a community with a shared future for mankind.
要携手推进
We should jointly advance modernization that is just and
要
equitable.
携手推进
We should jointly advance modernization that is open and win-win.
要携手推进
We should jointly advance modernization that puts the people first.
要携手推进多元
We
包
should
容
jointly advance modernization featuring diversity and inclusiveness. We should jointly advance modernization that is eco-friendly.
要携手推进
We should jointly advance modernization underpinned by peace and security.
Let's face it, China has invested over $100 billion into the continent of Africa in infrastructure, ports, roads, and also bridges, dams, and airports. A whole lot of other investment areas in agriculture and in technology, innovation, in a number of areas. This relationship is so strong now as compared to what it's been over the past couple of years. However, other experts argue that this particular relationship is drowning African countries into debt, and the famous debt trapping that has been talked about across the mainstream media with regards to this very important relationship with Africa and also China. However, African nations a number of African countries struggle with regards to these particular debt issues. However, there are a number of nations in the continent of Africa that are doing really well. So to point out, this is important to note, but more importantly, African nations owe more debt to multilateral institutions like the World Bank and IMF as compared to what they are owed to China. It's important to note that there are different narratives with regards to this particular story. We do have experts who say that this relationship is drowning the continent of Africa. Others argue that this relationship, to an extent, is a win-win relationship and partnership if you compare that with how Africa has been dealing with its international partners, especially in Europe and the United States, with regards to finance in major infrastructural projects. We all have seen how China has transformed the continent of Africa, especially a very good example is the Standard Gauge Railway that moved from Kenya, Mombasa, also to other parts across the continent of Africa, more importantly to Djibouti and also in Ethiopia. It's important to note that China is involved in a number of projects. However, this has also called for concern, why experts are questioning if this is sustainable. But again, let's play this clip with regards to one African expert who thinks the China-African relationship is not something to write home about. Let's play the clip now.
Okay, Adetunji, why don't you answer that? You tell us.
It's, first of all, for me, I look at this, the optics for me doesn't make a lot of sense. Over 50 African heads of states or representatives traveling, some of them, in fact, many of them from countries that are very poor, going to visit one man. Yes, China has very big, resources, but the fact that they have to travel to China at the same time, it already shows that it's a skewed relationship. It's almost like cap in hand, running to China to go and beg the master to say, please save us, we're dying of debt. Our countries are not really growing. I mean, if you look at the debt owed to China by African nations, almost $80 billion of debt. And most of these countries can't even afford to pay salaries, can't even afford to feed their citizens. As you can see with the protests in Kenya, also in Nigeria recently, there was wide-scale protest So my view is that this one-way relationship ought to be reversed very quickly. And if I have to quote President Cyril Ramaphosa, the president of South Africa, in his bilateral meeting with President Xi Jinping, he said that they need to reverse the trade deficit and also they need to restructure the relationship. So the question I ask, because I'm fortunate to be sitting on the BRICS Manufacturing Working Group in South Africa, which African products that are finished goods can you find in shops in China? The answer is none. So we got to really look at this situation. I think it's unfortunate. I think they could have done this meeting via online on Zoom if they're serious about change, especially in terms of the cost to many of these countries. And many of these countries also, I suspect the reason why they go to China is because there are no conditions that, for example, the West will ask for democracy, rule of law, upholding human rights. And China is not known for human rights, a good human rights record. And they tend to also, the deals that they sign with these African nations are opaque. And if you look at the Entebbe airport, for example, 20-year loan, and all the revenue has to go back to China. So I'm afraid it's not yet Uhuru. I think it's a one-way relationship. China stands to benefit. The African countries are going to be made in more debt. Yes, there are more debts to the West, but the conditions are different. China doesn't ask questions.
So
just give the money and tie them up.
Is that to say that you think, China's relationship then with African leaders in that sense? Because Einar has said that the relationship is strong, and it's shown at this conference that all of these leaders have come to attend. The top powers of all the African countries are there now in Beijing, that China's relationship with those leaders actually empowers and enriches the people at the top while disempowering the population itself?
Well, all you need to do is just check 20 years of China-Africa relations, and Africa is still worse off despite all the investment. Yes, there's been infrastructural developments in Africa, but when you look at the debt profile of these countries, they're worse off. Why are they protesting Kenya? Kenya is owing China about $6 billion, and they're going there for more money. It doesn't make any sense. Unless they're giving them the money without conditions, there is no value in these relationships. It's a one-way street. It's going to be more pain for Africa because they got to pay the money back. Yes, I know it's a good PR exercise for China in their quest to be able to dominate the South, but there is no value in going 50 people, leaders of sovereign nations, going to beg for more money, especially when they take that money and pocket most of the money. So there is no value. Okay. It's just a one-way relationship.
Andrea, let me just let Einar respond quickly. Ali Khan, I will come to you, but Einar, go ahead.
The elephant in the room with regards to this relationship is that a number of African countries are, once they collect this huge sum of money, they are not told on what to do with it. These countries choose on what projects they want to embark on and how this will benefit their own people. But if the projects do not benefit the local people, and the money comes to the country and is being used in such a way that the local individuals or the citizens do not feel that the loans that come from China is not helping things in the region, and then it ends up in the pocket of some individuals, that's a cause for concern.
I believe Ali Khan believes that the Africans aren't in control of their own countries. And this is definitely a narrative that's left over from colonial times, this idea that somehow the West should be making policies and telling Africans what to do. I think we're long past that, this kind of victim narrative that somehow Africa has been well done by over the last 500 years of colonial occupation, and taking of African resources is nonsense. China is trying to reverse the trade deficit by empowering African countries with the kind of machinery that they can use to process goods so that they can create jobs and create more value at home. Has that been done by Europe or the United States? No. China is also working on joint ventures for research and development so that they're sharing technology. They did this when they had the pandemic. They actually put factories that could produce this what was needed in terms of antiviral around the world, sharing it. That did not happen in the West. So this idea that clinging to the West is somehow going to solve Africa's problems, I think that's passé.
Okay.
That's why a number of mainstream media will question this relationship from other areas. For example, in Kenya is one of the countries that have borrowed huge sums of money from the country of China. And it's important to know that most recently there was uprising in Kenya as a result of the debt and a woeful lot of other things that were tied up with this particular protest. It's important to note that once this amount of money is taken from China, African governments should know what to do with it. They have to put this to also have some return on the investment. It's important. Otherwise, we will continue to see what's happening in Kenya, in other countries. In the course of this particular issue, a number of African experts have clearly explained this strategic relationship between China is not going anywhere soon. As you know that you have the Russians on the ground, the United States, the European Union as well. But China has leapfrogged a number of its geopolitical foes in the continent of Africa with regards to economy. And African nations are left to demonstrate that they can be acting more responsible in the continent. Hopefully, we've informed you regards to the strategic relationship that has been elevated between the country of China and the continent of Africa. Let us know what you think with regards to this relationship and why FOCAC is an important summit for the continent of Africa. If African leaders can make use of this particular very important moment in the history of the continent and make sure that the loans that are taken from China are also beneficial to the local people in the continent of Africa. We want to thank you for watching. If you are new here, we'll encourage you to smash the like button, share the video, and we are looking forward to meeting you in our next episode. Leave us a comment. Tell us how Chinese investment in your country has impacted your region with regards to or compared to what Western investment has done in your country. Thank you for watching again. We are looking forward to meeting you soon in our next video. Have a good day. Bye-bye.